Hello YouTube, I'm the Foam Witch, and in this video I'm going to show you how I made Deadpool's chest plate from the movie Deadpool and Wolverine. If you didn't already know, I've previously made Wolverine's chest armor. You can check that video out after you've watched this one. Otherwise, let's do this. The first thing I needed to do was come up with a template, and that template I am giving away free in the description of this video so you can make this for yourself. For the base of this build, I used the same template I made for the Wolverine chest armor. These pieces then got stuck together using specifically for foam hot glue sticks from the absolutely incredible Tig's Supplies. I will also put a link to the Tig's Supplies website in the description of this video. They have so many incredible materials for you to use for all your cosplay needs. Once all those pieces were stuck together, it looked like this. I didn't close it at the back because I wanted to add some Velcro to make this wearable. The Velcro got stuck onto the base using the hot glue on both sides. Before moving on to the next part, I wanted to tidy up the base a little, so I just used my Dremel with a sanding barrel attachment to sand down all the edges to round them all off. Once the base was tidy, it looked like this. Yes, you can still see some hot glue on the front, but that's going to be covered by all the details, so it's no need to worry about it. To create those said details, I covered the base in a layer of cling film and added masking tape on top of this. Using this reference photo, I could then draw on top of this to give the template, which could then be cut out. I only drew one half of the template because when these pieces are cut out, they can be flipped to give the pieces for the other half. It was then time to start adding those details, starting with this piece of the template that goes in the centre of the chest area. As you can see from this photo, this part has a texture to it, and the perfect thing to use to make this part was this pre-textured foam from Tig's Supplies. Drawing around this part of the template and cutting it out of the foam using a sharp craft knife, this gave the perfect textured piece. I then tidied up the edges using my Dremel before it got stuck onto the base using the hot glue. Every piece I put on this chest armor, I will tidy it up with my Dremel before sticking it on, and I will always stick it on with the hot glue, so I'm going to try not to say that after every single time. This is how it looked once that section was stuck on. That textured foam is absolutely perfect. Taking this section of the template, this is going to make the pec area. This part of the video is where you can see what I mean when I say I flip the template. You draw around it once the right way round, then you flip it over and draw around it again, giving two perfectly identical pieces that are mirrored for each side. All of the detail pieces that are stuck on top of the base are made out of 3mm foam, and because I didn't mention it before, I made the base out of 5mm. Once the two pec pieces were cut out, I then went back to the template and cut it out in sections to draw around it to show where the detail was going to go. I'm only showing how I made one of these pec plates, but obviously you're going to have to do this twice to make both of them. All of the lines that I'm drawing on here are going to be scored into the foam. This section of the template is going to be a layer added on top of that bottom pec piece. This got cut out of 3mm foam. I then put this piece to one side because I wanted to score the line details in first. These lines were scored in using my Dremel Versatip. Although using this is absolutely terrifying, it is really good for scoring in lines on foam. Once that lower line had been scored in just to make sure it was the right length, the layer that was cut out before was then stuck on top, and that gave something that looked like this. Then, the remaining detail lines got scored in, again using the Dremel. I do not have the steadiest of hands when I'm using this thing, mainly because I'm shaking because I'm terrified I'm going to burn my house down. So the lines do end up a little bit wonky, but you can fix this. If you have a set of needle files and have one that is round, you can use this to sand inside those lines to tidy them up and make them look a little bit more smooth. Hopefully here you can see that the line on the left looks slightly more crisp than the one on the right. If you can't, oh well. Both of these pec pieces needed a very slight curve adding before sticking them onto the base, so they got heated up with the heat gun and stretched over something curved to give that shape. Then they got stuck onto the base on either side, but for some reason I've only recorded me sticking on one. Soz about that. That layer piece on the pec from before has another detail added on top of that. I mean, I'm not going to say what I think this shape looks like, so I'm just going to call it a shape. This piece of the template got cut out of 5mm foam because it's slightly thicker than the rest of the detail. Again, remember to cut this out twice. There is a very small layer of 3mm foam added onto the edge of each of these pieces. that makes it look like this. These were quite difficult to cut out neatly because they were very curved, so I just tidied it up with my Dremel. Hopefully here you can see the difference between sanded and not sanded. These then got stuck on this section on the pec. Then moving on to this section of the template, and these get stuck on just above the pec area. And these parts also have the line details scored in. Like I said before, sticking these on just above the pec area. Next, moving on to this part of the template, which is going to give the ab area. When I traced this onto the foam, when I flipped the template over, I joined it up exactly to the one I've just done, just so I could cut this out in one piece. Once it was cut out, I then marked the lines around the edges, which again is where the lines were going to be scored in with the Dremel. On this piece, there's also a line scored down the centre. Sticking this on underneath the pec area with the textured foam piece in the middle. And this is how it was looking once all those pieces had been stuck on. Next, it was onto this larger piece of the template which gets stuck on the shoulders, folding across onto the back. And yes, I did need a stepladder to add this piece because my mannequin is way taller than I am. As you can see here, this is where the piece gets folded over and stuck to the back. Once this has been done twice, this is how it should be looking. I sanded the edges and added the score lines once this has been stuck on, just because I wasn't sure if I was going to have to trim any of the edges to make it fit. As you can see here, those score lines got added around the whole edge of these pieces. It was then time to make the belt parts that go around the sides. These were cut out of 3mm foam at a width of 4cm. You might also need to angle the edges of these slightly just to make sure that they fit. These get stuck on around the notches in the ab plate at the top, middle and bottom. And once added, should look something like this. This part of the template then gets cut out twice for the two top belt parts. These also have detail lines scored in, and should look like this. They then get stuck on the edge nearest to the ab plate of the two top belts. Taking that template piece that's just been used, it gets cut down the middle to give the template for the 4 remaining parts that go on the belts. These are less detailed than the previous pieces with just some angled lines in the middle, and again they get stuck on the edge nearest to the ab plate on the 4 remaining belts. And that should look a little something like this. There are then these 2 detail pieces that join the 2 ab plates. Using the template, 2 of these are cut out. There's then a thin strip of foam added either side to add another layer. Once they've been tidied up with the Dremel, they look like this. And once they've been stuck on, this is how the chest plate is looking. A collar piece is then made, and this is done by cutting out a long straight strip of foam and gluing it around the top edge. This then gets cut to shape once you know how long it needs to be. Looking at the reference photo, there was this detail piece on the collar. I think this is supposed to be some sort of clasp. I didn't want to leave it off because I wanted to add as much detail as possible. Once all the details were added, I then went round with some white spirit just to remove any remaining pen marks. And this is how the chest plate was looking once the build was complete and it was ready to begin sealing and painting. To seal the foam before painting, I use this incredible black flexi paint from Tig Supplies. And this is really great because it can be brushed on, it's non-toxic, meaning you can use it inside, and it dries really smooth and gives a great finish before painting. Once it had been left to fully dry, this is how it looked after 3 layers of the flexi paint. Because I wanted this video finished before the release of the film, I just had to use whatever red I had in my stash. Was this the right shade to paint it? I'm not convinced it was, but it's all I had to hand. After masking off some of the areas with masking tape, I then started to use this through my airbrush, so I just thinned it down enough with water that it could be sprayed on. However, sometimes when you thin down normal acrylic paint to use it through an airbrush, it makes the coverage a bit rubbish. So after being unhappy with the airbrush coverage, I actually just went and sponged the paint on, and this coverage was a lot better. To make those scored in detail lines pop out a bit more, I went over them with a dark mahogany wash. And as you can see here, it really brings those lines back out once it's been painted a flat colour. I didn't want this chest plate to look too clean, so I just took that same mahogany wash and sponged it on to add some weathering. And this is how it looked once the weathering had been finished. It was then time to peel off the masking tape. The best piece of advice I can give for this is heat up the masking tape with a hairdryer before peeling it off. This will heat up the adhesive slightly and make it easier to pull the tape off without peeling the paint as well. Once the red paint was dry and I had repainted the black, the painting was nearly complete. There were some areas that needed painting gold. That included these parts on the ab plates, these detail parts on the belts, these sections on the detail pieces on the ab plates, and the clasp detail on the collar. This gives a better look at which parts get painted gold, and once the gold had been finished, the Deadpool chest armour was complete. If you are still watching this video at this point, I want to give you a massive huge thank you. Like I said at the start, there is a free template you can download to make this yourself in the description of the video. I will be making the belt and the shoulder armour to go with this, but that will be at a later date, so make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on that. If you have enjoyed this video, it'd be awesome if you could give it a thumbs up like. Again, I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and all I've got left to say is, I'll see you next time.